We have the opportunity tonight to hear a family story at Jesse Brown's, and it is a story that happened over 30 years ago. And Jesse Brown's had a part in the story. Maybe that will come up, maybe it won't, but that's not the important part of the story. The story is an adventure that the dad had decades before that as a 20-year-old indestructible, if you will. And then in search of recreating adventure for his family is where that story led to. The Tent for Seven story. And so there is a book that came from this story and experience as well. And we do have them on hand here at Jesse Brown. So at the completion of our Storytellers Night, we will be talking about the book. It will be here to be personalized by the storytellers, by the authors. But we want to hear the story. So without any delay, we're going to invite Marty Ohlhaut and also Grace Lai, father and daughter, to the Storyteller stage. Let's welcome them.
Thank you.
Oh. Thank you, Bill. I'm Marty, and this is Grace, my daughter, one of 4 daughters.
But I'm his favorite for tonight, at least.
Well, actually, present company excluded. There's a couple other ones here. So I do really like her, though. Before we get started, just by way of transition, I really enjoyed listening to Tom's speech. I used to ride a motorcycle for many years. Well, not many years. I rode until I was about 22, and then I found myself at a Honda shop, wrapped up in gauze and bandages, standing over a pile of parts that used to be my motorcycle. So I transitioned to 4 wheels when I was about 22. So listening to that story gave me a little bit of heebie-jeebies. But I want to thank Bill again for having us here tonight. And he's correct. Our story started about 35 years ago at the Jesse Brown's outdoor store when we bought our tent for 7. And we needed a tent for 7 because there was 5 kids and the 2 of us, adults, supposedly adults. So the reason we got into this was because, my wife, who's watching our other little grandson tonight, was an intensive care nurse and a cardiac care nurse and nursing instructor, but she gave that up to stay home with the 5 kids. And of course, that left us on 1 income, which was fine. We both enjoyed the outdoors quite a bit. We loved being out in the woods and the forest and the trees and the climbing, and the kids had shown some propensity for that as well. And we were also both from big families. My wife was from a family of 7 kids, and there was 6 kids in my family, and now we got our 5 kids. And we thought, we really wanted to commit ourselves to having them appreciate being in a large family, and that's not always easy. So we worked at that, and we were committed to having them be a solidarity unit, be supportive of each other, live in harmony as much as you can. And so all of that sort of pointed towards doing some camping on vacations. It's a great way to bring a family together. So we took our tent for 7, or Big Blue, as we came to call it. The bottom of the tent was bigger than this stage here. And I could walk around in it pretty much free. And we used to hang clothes to dry in it, and the 7 sleeping bags, and there's room to move around in there. So it was a great tent, and we thank you, Bill, for that. It was only 1 here. The guy said, well, we'll make it real easy for you. You got 1 tent that'll put 7 people in it. So we got that big Eureka tent here. It lasted a long time, too. We had that thing for like 30 years. So we set about using our tent. We started camping out in the North Carolina mountains. We took a couple trips every year up to the Pisgah Forest and up to Mount Jefferson and all along the Blue Ridge. And we started out pretty bad. We were novices, and we got wet a lot and ate a lot of soggy food. But after a while, we got better. And we've been doing it for 4 or 5 years, and we decided, let's go out west. Let's take the 5 kids and let's go camping out west. So we went to Colorado and did the Colorado mountains for 2 weeks, and it went fine, much to my surprise. So we decided, okay, a couple years later, let's try this again. Let's see if we can do one more of these. So we went out to the West Coast. We started out in Seattle and camped our way down to San Francisco, and stopped at the redwoods and the lake and all that stuff. And we had, again, knock on wood, we had another really wonderful trip. And so we were feeling that this was really attaining our goal of bringing our family together. I will diverge for a second to say I'd also been inspired, as Bill just mentioned, to this camping kind of environment, this out west environment, because when I graduated from college, 5 of my buddies and myself bought an old van and patched some windows in it and put some oil in it, and we went out west for most of the summer. We spent June to August, we drove to Colorado. We went to the top of Long's Peak, to the bottom of the Grand Canyon, across Death Valley, up along the coast, up to, what's up there, Yosemite and Yellowstone, and through the Black Hills, and took us about 11 weeks. And I kind of fell in love with being out there in the wide spaces and the mountains and the lakes. And so I was thinking I wanted to be a park ranger. In fact, there was a park ranger here last time who told an interesting story. And I thought, well, before I do that, I'm going to graduate from graduate school, make a little money, and then I'll become a park ranger. Now, that's a bad idea. Once you get a little bit of money in your pocket, you go, park rangers, that's a pretty austere life. Maybe I'll just go visit the parks with my kids, and we'll stay in a lodge, So, but our camping trips were working out pretty good, and I felt like the family was coming together pretty well with our experiences. And
Yeah, and part of it was he wanted us to get closer together. And for those of you who have camped, you know that you really can't get much closer than when you're crammed in a tent together. And there's no privacy in there. There's no personal space in there. But in addition, you really had to work together to pitch a 7-person tent. That thing does not pop up on its own. So you really have to work together to pitch the tent, to build a campfire, to cook your food and clean up. But we really loved our camping trips. We had so much fun. And there's maybe some things that we weren't huge fans of, like the campground bathrooms and taking showers with spiders. But, at the end of the day, my best childhood memories are from camping and being out in nature and being with my friends and hiking the mountains and sliding off the waterfalls and just spending time at the end of the day around the campfire, making s'mores and laughing and having a great time.
She never told us this while this was happening. I'm just now hearing this. We really were, things were going along pretty good, and we really didn't have any mishaps that I could even recall in all those years of camping. And these guys are getting older. She's getting more interested in boys than bears, and especially more interested than their parents. So we thought, let's give us one more shot, and then we'll maybe call this quits. One more big trip. So we decided to go out to the Pacific Northwest. Great, British Columbia, partly because it's out there. It's away from the crowds, it's desolate, and it's cooler weather up there. So we thought, we'll just take a 2-week shot up there.
Spoiler alert, it did not go as planned at all.
Well, we were going to go to next year, 93. And you set about doing all the things you got to do to get your airplane tickets and your tents patched up and everything ready to go. And about 6 weeks before we're supposed to leave, we're all set. I tore my ACL at a stupid little pickup basketball game with some other coaches. And back then, maybe today, an ACL tear, I'm sure we've got some here. It was about 9 months of rehab. So fast forward 9 months, 94, we go through the same, and I should have taken the hint right there. I should have said, that's a sign, you're done. But instead, I ignored the sign. So we head out, and July 28th, we land in Seattle with 21 pieces of luggage. 3 bags per 7 people. And to get there, we had to kind of fill up the last couple with firewood, because we wanted to make sure we had plenty of firewood, and we had a couple of empty bags.
And these were huge duffel bags, not like little suitcases, but huge duffel bags.
So we piled them all in our rent-a-wreck van out there. We loaded up with groceries, and we headed up towards Jasper. On our second day, we had one of our first fun experiences. We had the first of 2 bear encounters. Now, we're all here, everybody's fine, but we did have several bear encounters on this trip. First one, we were heading up the road and we stopped, and the girl, we were having a little potty break on this desolate road, and this massive bear comes out of the wood right at us. Fear. Somebody asked about fear? That's fear. I was, woo. But the bear ran right by us and went into the woods. A couple hours later, we're at our campsite, and actually you guys had all gone off someplace for a hike, and I was working in the campsite, and here comes black bear number 2. At least I think it was a black bear. Now, there's a big difference between a black bear and a brown bear, right? And they behave very differently. And the problem is, you can't always tell which one is which by looking at them. So you look at this guy here and you go, well, is that a black bear or a brown bear? There's a really good way to tell. When the bear comes into your campsite, you go climb the nearest tree. The bear comes up behind you and gets you, it's probably a black bear. If he rips the tree down, he brings it down on the ground and he gets you, that's probably a brown bear. And if he's growling and tearing things to shreds, everything, then that's probably a grizzly bear, which I think is what this one is.
Well, the funny thing is, the only bear that you can really tell by the color is a black and white panda bear, which does you no good because they don't eat people.
It also does you no good because they're only in China. Yeah, they're in so, and there are cinnamon bears, and there's blue bears, and red bears, and white bears. So a lot of bears out there, and I'm scared of every one of them. And some of that's documented in the book. But the bears were really, they didn't really eat us or anything. But a lot of little things started going wrong on this trip. And it was little things. First of all, we went to the Northwest for the reasons I mentioned before. It turns out we went up in the hottest summer on record in British Columbia at that time. It was the most crowded. The two things we were looking for was cool weather, no crowds, and there's people everywhere. The heat had started forest fires. There was a lot of smoke in the air. So a lot of the mountains, you couldn't even see them hardly. And then closer to home, we were missing tent pegs, and we burnt all our oil the first night by accident. I left my boots on the side of the road the first day we stopped for something. Just little things. Yeah, but I'm thinking they're adding up here. Hopefully that's it. And about day 6 or so, we thought the weather had changed. It was feeling a little cooler, we thought. And we'd found a great campsite right next to a river, the Kicking Horse River. Anybody been to the Kicking Horse River in British Columbia? Gorgeous place, whoa, gorgeous. And we're going, oh, this is so fantastic. And the ranger said, hey, you guys, if you get up early tomorrow, you can go on a canoe ride on Emerald Lake, which is right there on the Kicking Horse River. One of the most beautiful places in British Columbia. And we're going, that's a great idea. We'd love to go on this canoe ride. And they said, well, if you get there early enough, we'll furnish you with a ranger, and they'll take the canoe ride with you. And so this is.
Oh, so there was a little incident at the lake that morning involving my mom. And so she had kind of gone off. We didn't know where she was. And so my dad went to look for her, and he found her. I can't say it either. He found her laying in the grass, cut to shreds, covered in blood. Okay, so then he goes to tell the ranger to call an ambulance. So they do, and when he comes back, he finds a man and a woman on either side of her, and the man says, I'm a doctor, and we have no clue where he came from. He wasn't there in the morning when we got there. So the doctor stays there with my mom, and I mean, she's cut up really, really bad, and he knows what to do to keep everything sort of in. The woman, his wife, came and took care of the kids because we didn't know what was going on. We were freaking out, of course. So when the ambulance finally loads up my mom and takes her away, my dad wants to go say thank you to the doctor, and he was gone. We couldn't find him anywhere. He wasn't anywhere at the lake. He was just completely gone. So the ambulance at that point, we're trying to figure out, do we take her to Golden, which is really small and has a really small medical facility, but it's closer? Or do we go to Banff, which is a lot bigger, but it's a lot further away? So ultimately, they decide to take her to Golden because they're not sure she'll survive the trip to Banff. So we get to Golden, and the doctor there says, I can't help her. Like, you need to go to Banff, and she needs to have emergency surgery. But he was able to at least tell us that she would live, and he got her cleaned up a bit before we pretty much went back into the ambulance, and we followed along in our 15-passenger van. We get to Banff, and as my dad has mentioned, it was just, Canada was completely booked that year. So, and that included all the campgrounds, all the hotels, even the hospital was completely booked. So she ends up in a room, sharing a room with this woman named Lauren, who turned out to be a blessing in disguise. My mom stayed in the hospital for 3 days, 2 nights, and then we had a big problem because after having major surgery, you can't really go camping again. So we had nowhere to go.
Okay, good job.
Oh, thanks.
I'm glad you're here.
Oh, jeez.
You know, this is 30 years ago. We've never actually gotten up and talked about it before, for obvious reasons. Anyway, let's see, where were we? Lauren comes over and says, hey, I understand your predicament. Why don't y'all come and stay with us? Come and stay with you? I mean, wow, thank you, but I can't imagine doing that. How could you possibly? She's here at the hospital also. Oh, I'm sorry. Lauren was the roommate that she had. Thank you.
The hospital roommate.
The hospital roommate, yeah. When it was crowded, you know, like Grace said, the hospital was full. They took us in because it was an emergency, and they put us in with Lauren. So poor Lauren's losing her single room to us, and now she's offering her home to us. So I was kind of like, oh, that's really, thank you, but I can't imagine doing that. And she goes, well, you know, if we were down in North Carolina camping with y'all and we had a little emergency, you would take us in, wouldn't you? And I'm going, well, like, would I? I mean, what would you do?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. Like, what would you do? And when you're thinking about the answer, I would like to add in the fact that Lauren also had 4 kids. So that's 9 kids in one house, and most of the kids were under the age of 10 at that point. So, and then both moms had just had major surgery. So
I'm standing there going, what am I going to do? I said, well, I know what my wife would do, and therefore that's what I'm going to do. So we'll take your offer. And the other reason we were kind of stuck is, you know, we mentioned there all the accommodations for full. We did have our tent pinched by the river, if you remember back before all the fireworks here. So we thought, well, it's midnight now after surgery. There's no place to stay here. The hospital actually had rooms set aside for these kind of deals, but they were all full. So we thought, okay, we'll just drive back up to the campsite. It's midnight, but we got to sleep someplace. So we hopped in the car. We headed up the road back to the camping grounds, and we get it's about an hour drive. We got about 55 minutes into it, and we run into a roadblock. And so we get to this roadblock, and the officer says, you can't go down there. There's been a torrential rain today. It's set off an avalanche with a glacier and a mudslide. The river's washed out. It's washed out the Continental Highway, and you can't. I'm going, you're kidding me, right? I'm looking around for Rod Serling from the Twilight Zone or something. I said, no, in fact, I said, our campground's down there. He goes, if your tent's down there, it's probably gone. River's overflowed. Right now, I requested a site by the river, and the river overflowed over. And he said, so you just need to go back to the hospital, which we did, and we slept in the van. Well, we stayed in the van overnight. We made it back to the campsite a couple days later, and miraculously, our tent was one of the only tents that survived. The place was wiped out, and our tents, and I feel like, come on. Okay, a little back and forth here. And we actually, when we got there, we got in the tent, and we're going, I can't believe this thing is perfectly dry. The windows were open in the tent, half of them. And we're getting in the tent, we're going, I believe this, and then it starts to pour down rain. So we rolled the windows up, and we camp out. We headed out the next day. We picked up Jolene at the hospital, and we headed to the Walsh's house.
Yeah, so we went to Lauren's house, and I'm ashamed to admit that us kids were not that upset about this turn of events. I mean, we'd been camping for the last week, and as much as we love camping, we were starting to smell like the laundry's dirty, and we were basically moving into, Lauren lived in a mansion, so it was this big mansion up on the hill overlooking the city of Calgary with the Canadian Rockies in the background. So we weren't that upset. And the neighbors had horses, and I'm obsessed with horses. I have a horse now, love her. So we got to move into a mansion and ride horses all weekend. So we were like, Dad, this was the best vacation ever. This is fantastic. And it really was one of the most beautiful places that I've ever seen. And really, I think as time has gone by and I've looked back on it as an adult, I feel like the real beauty was their generosity.
Yeah, and it went uneventfully. The kids got along great. The mothers, the fathers we
took care of everything.
Yeah, amazing. Surprisingly.
Yeah, we only spent the weekend there because we did kind of have to get going. We had to make our way back to the United States and eventually back to Seattle so we could catch our flight in a couple of days later. But we did look into flying my mom home. But I think she felt kind of guilty for the accident and causing the trip to kind of derail. And so she wanted to stay with us. She was determined to see it out. So we tried to accommodate her and include her as much as we could, which is kind of hard when you're hiking and camping. But everything kind of went well for the next couple of days until my dad's 44th birthday. We decided to take a hike to Iceberg Lake in Glacier Park, and it's a strenuous 4-hour hike. So obviously my mom and my youngest sister was 6 at the time, so they stayed behind. And we get up there and it's just absolutely gorgeous. I mean, blue water with huge chunks of ice floating around. So we're up there, it's about 4 o'clock, which is feeding time for the animals. So we're like, let's head on back down. So we noticed that we are the only people on the trail on the way back down. And that's usually never good. So about a mile from the trailhead, we notice that there are 2 rangers sitting on the side of the trail, and that's also never good. And then we notice that they're holding rifles, and that's really bad. So we look across the trail and we see this huge grizzly bear, and that's really not good. As I mentioned, my mom and youngest sister were back at the trailhead, and some rangers had, closed off the trail down there so nobody else would go off. And so my mom sees this and is like, my family's up there. What's going on? Why is the trail closed? The rangers say, oh, don't worry about it. There's a bear up there, but we've got rangers handling it. It'll be fine. But you can't really tell a mom not to worry when her family's hiking with a grizzly bear. So she starts to get very upset, as you can imagine. And about that time, a woman shows up named Gloria, and she said, you know what, my husband's hiking up there too. I think everything's gonna be fine. Don't worry, don't panic. And this woman stayed with her for about an hour, just reassuring her that everything was, gonna be okay. So we finally make it off the trail, and my mom's hugging us, and we're telling her about the grizzly bear that we saw. And she says, let me introduce you to Gloria. We've been hanging out for the last hour. And she turns to introduce us, and Gloria is gone. We never saw her again. She had just disappeared. And my mom said that Gloria had been very vague about her husband, and we never saw a lone male hiker the whole time on the trail, not going up, and we never saw one coming down.
We don't know if there ever was one, or I'm not sure there was ever really even a Gloria. But, so this is the kind of fast forward a little bit. The next evening, a lady came into the campground, and our campsite, and she goes, hey, your wife's using that cane all wrong. And I'm going, it's a cane. She goes, yeah, did somebody show her how to use that? And we're going, no, actually nobody did. It was in the hospital room, so we thought we were supposed to take it. She goes, well, she's using it all wrong. She's going to hurt her back. Let me show you how to use that. She spent 5 minutes with her, so that I just saved your back surgery, and she vanished.
And this woman was a physical therapist.
Oh, I'm a physical therapist. Oh, okay. So the next day, this is our last day where we got to get out without getting hurt. And to make a long story short, we'll leave some of it suspenseful in the book for y'all. But on the last day, we're in the creek, spending the day trying to get out of the day without any more harm. And it gets to about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And we said, okay, kids, come on, we're going to get out of the stream. We're going to head on home and pack up and get out of here with no more incidents. And then, by the way, be careful when you walk across those slippery rocks. I could just skip over the next part, right? Well, now we're in search of dental assistants.
Oh, am I taking over?
No.
Oh, you're okay.
What are you talking about? So
You're
I just want to so just quick, let me get up on the road. I'm walking him back to our van, and a guy comes up and he blocks me, and I'm going, excuse me, sir, I got to get back to my, he goes, oh, it looks like your son's got some problems. I said, yeah. He goes, well, what do you think he said? I'm a dentist. But that's all we have of it. He says, let's come over to my RV. It's parked next to that van down there, which was our van. And we get there, and he says, this is my wife. She's a dentist also. I know. I'm just going to leave it out of the book because nobody's going to believe it, but it's true. Bill said it had to be true. So to wrap it up, they help us out. They tell us what we need to do. We get in the car to leave. I go, I forgot to thank those people. I hop out, and the RV's gone. Not again. It's true, Bill. So anyway, Grace, take us home.
Oh, well, the next day, we drove about 13 hours across Montana, Idaho, and Washington to get to Seattle, where we spent the night at a hotel. We finally got one. The next morning, we go to the airport to catch our early morning flight. And we get to the gate, people are boarding, and they say, oh, you're late, we've been bumped, you're off the flight. So I said, I don't understand, like the plane is here, people are still getting on, but they can do what they want, so we were bumped. They said, you're welcome to come back tonight and try to catch the red-eye, overnight flight at 11 p.m., but you have to fly standby, so there's no guarantee you'll get on it. So we all showed up that night, and one by one, we did eventually get on the plane heading to Charlotte. But of course, we didn't go to Charlotte. We got diverted to Greensboro, where we were then divided up, and we all eventually did make it to Charlotte. However, a couple weeks go by, and my mom is now starting to get very sick, and my brother is getting sick. And so they went and had all these tests. They went to the doctors, and nobody could figure out what was going on. Until finally, my aunt, who's a doctor up in Ohio, said, you might have Giardia.
Bad water.
Which is an intestinal parasite that you really don't want. And so she and my brother both tested positive for Giardia because they had drank contaminated water at one of the campsites. They both went on medication. They were okay, but this is at the same time that my mom is trying to recover from her surgery, and she's doing lots of physical therapy for all of her wounds and taking care of 5 kids.
Oh. So to get to wrap it up with the book, I had traumatized my entire family. And most of my friends, everybody that heard the story, you should write a book. And as I'm laying awake night after night at 1 o'clock, I can't go to sleep. I thought, well, you know what? What the hell? I'll try to write a book. So I really wasn't writing a book to write a book. I was writing it down as therapy. This is the old, write your love letter and then burn. I was writing it down. It took me about 9 months from 1 a.m. to 3 a.m. to type away on my little laptop. And after 9 months, I wrapped it up and I said, that's it. This is going to go on the shelf way up here. And maybe my grandkids will read this 50 years from now, but I don't ever want to see this thing again. Done.
Yes. And then I found it many years later, and I was reading through it, and I'd always wanted to be a writer, and I'm flipping through the pages, and I'm like, there's a lot of content here. And he had written down a lot of his Wild West stories, and you never, as a kid, you never picture your parents as anything other than your parents. You never picture them as a 20-year-old.
Real people.
Yeah, road tripping across the West. So there was a lot of content to work with, and that's how we eventually spent many years turning that binder of stories into the book, Tent for Seven.
One last thought. I don't want to scare you away. I know this is all terrible stuff we're telling you. In fact, 90% of the book is really funny. The main feedback we get on the book is that it's hilarious, laugh out loud. I don't even like that term, but laugh out loud. You can't put it down. It reads like a thriller, and it's kind of corny, but people say it's a little bit inspirational. It's about the family. It's about perseverance, and it's about paying a little nod to divine intervention.
And if you like Bill Bryson, I love Bill Bryson. He's my favorite author, but it's got like the humor and wit of Bill Bryson. And just to completely wrap it up, I will say that I didn't want people to read the book and think I'm never going camping again, which 2 people have now told me. But really, the point was to be entertaining.
Not going to camp with us anyway.
It's supposed to be entertaining, and ultimately, we really just hope that people read the book and they're inspired to come into Jesse Brown's and buy a tent and head out on their own adventure.
One last disclaimer. we wrote most of this book before Bill Bryson wrote A Walk in the Woods. So I think he got an early copy. Thank you. Thank you.
So,
I know.
okay, the question is, what happened to your mother?
Well, and the answers?
Oh, in the book.
We got to leave one little thing. We don't
That's
We can't
right.
talk about it. I'll start crying again.
There was one critic that did say Tent for Seven will make you wonder how a family adventure with so many pitfalls and perils can create positive memories across generations. Through it all, you will find the love of a father for his family, no matter the setting and no matter the situation. So we'll have that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Are there any questions that we can tell? Any questions? As you can see, that's what's special about Storytellers Night, is sharing the heart and soul of something that happened 30 years ago, but the effect on a family. And of course, Grace was going to save Marty from emotion if it happened, but I think Marty saved Grace from emotion. But thank you both for your story. And they will be on hand. We have the book charged up and ready, and they will personalize it, sign it. It's a great gift. It's a great, I guess, encouragement to go out there and maybe to be forewarned about the things that can happen. Pre-planning book. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Thank you.